Damn right it is. All right. Let's talk about marginalia, lessons of the marginalized. We're going to set a stage here. The study of human psychology has come from one specific set of people. We're going to set the weird stage. Weird stands for something. Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and developed cultures. This subpopulation has been used as a stand-in for the rest of the planet. This assumption has led to the belief that aspects of human psychology are universal. But how realistic is it that the entire planet operates the same way when variables change? Researchers often assume their findings are universal and are rarely challenged or must defend them, so they presume the findings from one will be generalizable to all. It is assumptive to base an entire subject of knowledge without comparative study, as weird societies fall at the extreme end of human distribution. Which brings us to this. Since weird societies occupy an extreme end of human distribution, using them or their processes for understanding the world is problematic. Weird societies use moral reasoning, a theory that moves standards of moralities from internal ones to hypothetical external ones. This theory is tricky as there is scant evidence for this hypothetical state of moral reasoning, or even evidence of it existing outside of weird societies. Looks can be deceiving. For example, how many mushrooms do you see here? According to moral reasoning, you have been taught how to count, you know what a mushroom looks like, and assuming this is all the information, you have a full picture. Who wants to answer my question? How many mushrooms are there? Oh, come on, someone be brave. Not you, Mom, not you. Because she'll answer it every time. Like my mother will like literally come to, she's my like assistant if there's a magic act, but we're not doing a magic act. I'm excited about this one. Who wants to guess? How many are there? Go ahead.
Clearly there's only 7. There's no possibility.
Clearly there are only 7, but your answer is a natural one if we were only looking at the surface. However, if we remove the top layer of, oh, everyone answered in here. Oh, that's cute. The answer is a natural one if you're looking at the surface. However, if we remove the top layer of soil, we see they all belong to the same fungi through the mycelium. So the total number here is 1 fungus, but moral reasoning assumes that one can have all of the information. It is almost impossible to have all of the information. Therefore, moral reasoning is almost impossible. And it is better to use some other process to gain a fuller picture. Most scientists come from weird places, which leads to a missing variation. Any set of criteria used must come from empirical comparative data, not the assumption of objectivity based on incomplete information or colloquially an assumption. I call this the mushroom assumption. People assume based on their experience that there must be 7 individual mushrooms. They have no evidence to tell them otherwise. The brain produces the fastest answer, not the correct one. We do this all the time about pretty much everything. It's imperative to get the full picture before making a pronouncement. Now we're going to talk about the weirdness of psychology. Western psychology has positioned itself as the universal psychology, representing all other psychology. Claiming that Western psychology stands outside of history and speaks for most of humanity, that saying every other psychology is somehow rooted and culturally embedded within a specific historical and indigenous perspective, just not Western psychology. This comes from coloniality. Weird professionals often ignore the long-standing patterns of power that come after colonialism that defined relations and knowledge. When we add coloniality and modernity, we get race. Colonizers legitimized their domination by agreeing that they were modern and that all others were primitive. Scientists created racial hierarchy as a method of separation. Anything that was not modern by the Western standard got a classification. The rest was just normal. European conquest and the rise of Western powers were considered linear and natural by weird people. That was modernity's outward movement from the West to the savage non-West. Even when colonialism was officially over, there was a second colonialism of the mind, which made the colonized skeptical of their own indigenous psychologies. This is where we get the creation of the oppressor. This is going to be a difficult conversation, and I appreciate you coming along for it. Men, especially white men, commit more violence than any other group in the United States. Violence, especially lethal violence, is woven into the fabric of American life. Refusing this connection allows individuals to say that mass death is unrelated to the longer arc of violence throughout American history. This all comes from the colony. Violence is how the colonial state operates, violence to enforce specific rules and orderings of society, which comes from the fundamental building block of the colony, the plantation, reordering the natural world by assumption. Some claim that male violence is an ancient result of human evolution, claiming that social conditions of the colony are unavoidable outcomes of an underlying evolutionary hierarchy. While evolution does play a role, a more complex array of variables are responsible and are not to be assumed. This all creates colonial masculinity. It is masculinity against intimacy, which is perceived as a threat to the creation and existence of colonies. This violence influences men and masculinity in the modern age, hurting others before they can hurt you. This masculinity does not exist over deep evolutionary time. It does not exist until colonizers stole indigenous lands. European colonization has changed human genetic variation and health in the Americas, coming from centuries of sexual violence and forced intermarriage, resulting in an embodied ecology of toxic masculinity and violence. Sexism degrades the earth, and undoing sexism is crucial for a more livable planet. Structural bigotry is when spaces or policies diminish autonomy and choices available, especially as a result of identity or experience. A 2016 report found that Black and brown people are twice as likely as white people to live near dangerous chemical facilities. Black and brown children make up 2/3 or 5.7 million children that live within 1 mile of a high-risk chemical facility in the United States. As practitioners, when movements fail to recognize the intersection of oppression, power is lost. Coalitions become less stable, and activists are forced to choose their first emergency while sending the other ethical and political commitments to the background. I have 4 examples of marginalized groups that show the need to recognize the intersections of oppression. Conservation has big challenges and needs to have everyone included to get the outcomes we need to survive. Let's start with indigenous perspectives. Indigenous peoples understood their land long before colonizers. They were mostly murdered in the attempts of colonizers to silence them in their oppression to their opposition to their oppression. It turns out that indigenous people and their practices worked better than the colonizers' plans and led to millennia of prosperity, 9,000 years of balanced living between human cultures and their larger environment. Since the invasion by colonizers, the soil has been sapped of its nutrients, and the federal government must subsidize 1 in 5 agricultural products because the process has been industrialized and is no longer effective. And here are some factors that indigenous people bring to conservation that can serve as examples. They believe in interconnectedness, that they have an interconnected relationship with their land, which influence their people and culture. It fostered a sense of responsibility and protection of their land and waters. Often, they were excluded from resource-related decision-making because they do not follow the Western model, leading to ineffective farming practices and a lack of connection with nature. This exclusion is a historic legacy of colonizers who attempted to transform indigenous societies. Colonial violence was used against those that engaged in non-European standards which offended the colonizers, to the detriment of the land and its capacity to feed its inhabitants. Colonizers could not stand the indigenous relationships between the sexes. Men did not dominate women, and women were often land stewards. This put women in central decision-making roles within their communities. Some were even leaders, which held considerable power and influence over men, something colonizers could not accept, and punished them for simply being different and refusing to be conquered. This gendered violence has continued for centuries and impacts us today in our murdered and missing Indigenous women. Without Indigenous perspectives, ecofeminism would not exist. Ecofeminism was deeply influenced by Indigenous knowledge. These Indigenous communities were considered holders of essential ecofeminist wisdom and fervent protectors of the natural world. Indigenous communities are uniquely vulnerable to the environmental changes stemming from climate change. We ignore them at our own risk. Moving on to women. Ladies, women as land stewards and leaders have been the foundation of many successful cultures, and the subjugation of them to the power, nope, that's not right. Women as land stewards and leaders have been the foundation of many successful cultures, and the subjugation of them to the desires of anyone is a truly heinous abuse of power. Oppression is unacceptable in any form, but especially in any subjective understanding of the systems built to dominate, an unnatural and maladaptive quality in humans. Women are needed in every process, and any system that is used needs to reflect that. Ecofeminism is a response to the link between environmental destruction and women's oppression in the West. Women are most severely affected by climate change and natural disasters. Emphasis on care and healing shifted to tech and market-based solutions as women were no longer centered in the conversation about climate issues. Climate change increases pressures on the marginalized first because elites can avoid the impacts. A lack of women's voices comes from a desire to dominate and control other people's environments and desires. Inequity makes women and children 14 times more likely to die in ecological disasters than men. Dominion does not work. To critique power and positively promote positive change is one main goal of the modern ecofeminist movement. Ecological critiques without a review of power and its effect on society are partial. Without a critique of power, hidden misogyny and its ruin cannot be revealed. Now we're going to move on to environmental racism. Marginalized people, but specifically Black and Brown people, have been made to suffer at the hands of oppression. Environmental racism is an insidious aspect of our modern world, as it is completely unnecessary and avoidable. The fact it exists shows that oppression for any reason, be it political, cultural, or economic, is a crime against humanity. Distribution. Environmental racism is environmental harm distributed by racial power dynamics. Colonizers achieved control of this land through mass violence by displacing indigenous peoples, forcing migrations of the enslaved, and creating prisons, plantations, and reservations. European oppressors saw themselves as normal and everyone else as not normal. They created a hierarchy to standardize oppressive power, privilege normality, and wealth to those that supported oppression. Whiteness is a code, and using it is a way to distance oppressive people from being held accountable for their actions. Do not give oppression relief by calling it something else. When Black and Brown people are included in previously exclusive spaces, it can be seen as evidence of progress in race relations. But to be in these spaces requires emotional labor from Black and Brown people about the racism they experience. Often their experiences are minimized and questioned so much that they are forced to choose between participating in their own objectification or risk alienation and or exclusion. In creating race, oppressors made it so there can never be a race-neutral way of dealing with a problem. Reproduction of these power dynamics prioritizes predictable patterns of behavior and hides social problems rather than solving them. These spaces replicate power and privilege, missing the mark entirely. Now to queer ecology. Variation in any species is necessary for its survival. It is common among every species on the planet. Sexual variation and gender identity are two elements of variation in the human species. Fear is the emotion at the base of bigotry, and rather than try and understand this variation, there are many who would rather it not exist. This is a maladaptive outcome of toxic masculinity and the myth of domination in our society. Sex and sexuality have not been stable over time. Behaviors that were regarded as simply acts or practices were only recently reclassified into matters of biology. Many new kinds of sexual species were specified through the scientific study of sex. Sexological research has assumed that sex and gender and sexual variation were the living archives of Europe's subhuman past. Effeminate men, sex for pleasure, and non-monogamy were commonly provided justification to produce racial distinctions. Race and sex were co-constituted through the scientific research of the time, providing a fictional moral mandate for the march of global imperialism and sexual conversion. Many charge queer sexualities with being against nature, a perspective that has been used to validate slavery and eugenics. This gives too much authority to science for deciding social, political, and moral questions when science is a tool and a component of the process, not the final arbiter. This is a process of taking apart sexual norms and categorizing associations with humans. It widened the scope of academic research into cultural, geographic, and historical aspects of human sexuality, unlike oppressors who try and narrow the scope to achieve their goals. Queer people appropriate space, and in doing so, challenge understandings of nature. Providing an expanded historical narrative of sexuality shows how humans have shaped social constructions of nature. Queer space highlights a space of difference, an arena of self-doubt, self-criticism, and possibly of liberation. All of this to say, we have a partial picture. All of these perspectives look at how marginalized voices are separated from the conservation discourse by their proximity to the other. The other is a very specific subpopulation of the planet. As we discussed earlier, this is a dangerous practice to have any one subpopulation stand in for the rest of the planet. We have a partial picture, and the answers to fill it in have been found and are being discovered. It is up to us as practitioners to put them to good use. What is being done to fill it in? There are so many options, whether it be decoloniality, environmental justice, challenging the status quo, facilitation, evaluating differently, inclusion of active residents, leaders, and communities, indigenous perspectives, ecofeminist approaches, the interconnectedness of all things. I have so much to say about all of this, and I could go on for hours. So please, I know I've said a lot, and I know I've been very emphatic in how I feel. I would like to hear what you think.
Gregory.
Yes, Dad.
Well done. Huzzah. In addition to structural bigotry, how would you add economic bigotry?
I would say it's part of the same thing.
Because I think it is a combination of the both are hugely dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And I separate sexual bigotry is not structural, but is completely there. It just seems different in some way. I don't understand why it is, but it certainly is bigotry. I think you nailed structural. I'd like to see where you would put economic.
Yeah,
And then,
I would actually argue that economic bigotry is part of structural bigotry because it is part of the systems we've built. The economic system privileges those that are seen as normal and says that those that are not seen as normal are outside of that traditional definition. To your point about queer ecology being different than the other ones, I think
I'm sorry. Hang on before you move on, because subjugating race and women, you could trace to economic drivers. I can certainly see that.
well, I think that the oppression of race and women happened together. It wasn't because of economics. It was because the people who created the systems knew that those two groups of people would not go with what they were saying. So they built literal structure so that it would never happen. So they they built it into the structure of society.
To what end, Greg? So I agree with your assessment. It's really correct, but to what end do you think?
Well, I don't think there was an end. I think that
economics was an end. Power and money is an end.
But power and money is.
But there's more of an end. I think you're alluding to more. So I wonder what you're alluding to. I agree with you.
Well, I'm not. Okay, so money is a human construction the same way that race and sex is a human construction. So all of these do not exist outside of human creation. So I don't believe that there is any part of economics that isn't influenced by other social factors. And that's borne out in the practices of oppressive nations. So they use economics to oppress people. They use social institutions to oppress people because that stops people who are being oppressed from rising up and killing them. That is the bare bones of it all. And I would say that especially for women, and I don't want to speak, I think Leander could speak to this, and Marcelo could probably speak better to this. Women are told all of the time that if you just did better, you would get more. No, that is not what happens. They pick one or two, hold them up as examples, and when they cross even the barest of lines, they smack them back down and they say, you're the problem. And if you talk to any person of color about how they are conceived of socially, they will say, my race is first and my color is second. And that is the part to me that is so hard to hear, because I don't understand how a lack of melanin makes me better. I've never understood that. And it does not make sense. And no matter how many times a racist has tried to explain it to me, it still doesn't make sense. So I don't think we're actually I don't think we're talking about two different things. I think we're talking about the same thing, which is it's built into the system. We have to remove it from the system, which means making it evident in the system consistently. If I got that right, y'all. I don't want to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Michelle, it was exactly what I was saying in my head. Like, to what end? The end is domination. The end is subservient to the higher race so that we can all live in this peaceful world where we're all saying the same thing, doing the same thing, no questions are being asked, and now the world is better for it.
Except for the world's on fire, so it doesn't work.
Except, Leander, I think that starts with, I'm in control and don't want to lose control, therefore I'm going to subjugate you to all of that, which is, I don't want to lose anything, I want to gain it all, and the rest of it is just mechanisms.
And I can see it as a mixture of that with the domination mindset of, well, I have power and my power is right. And so therefore I should dominate everything because everything else is wrong. And so my right
justification, that's just justification. I don't give that much credence.
Wait, hold on. The fact that it's being justified though is the problem. I understand that you.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes,
so I think what you're actually saying is, and this is where I credit you, you're a bit further than most by being able to say that it exists and that it's a problem. I'm not even really speaking to that. I'm speaking to people who can't even get to the point of like, we built this system the way we did. And I think to what you're saying, Michelle, it's this ridiculous notion of the scarcity mindset, which comes from fear, using fear to constantly come after and say, they're coming for you, they're coming for you, they're coming for you. If you ask a poor person in the South right now, a poor white person in the South, what are they most afraid of? They're most afraid of Mexicans, which they're not anywhere near. And then they're afraid of them because The people they trust tell them that's what's happening. Does that make sense? No.
The last point was exactly right. It's because people tell them they should fear that.
Right. And I think that's
why do they trust those people is another question.
Well, to our previous conversation around trust, it makes them feel good. People don't want to hear reality. They want to hear things that they already believe. And that's the issue that I run into social science a lot, is confirmation bias is really hard from both the social scientist perspective and from the thing that they're investigating. Because the people they're investigating, they don't want to admit that they're doing something wrong. And the people who are doing the investigation are trying so hard to be objective that they elevate this, like these things are equal when they're not. So when I hear someone say, the Chinese invented climate change as a way to stop growth or whatever, all I hear is my economic interests are more important than your living. That's what I hear. And I hear that because I live in a place where we talk about those things and we have that kind of relationship. Other places don't have that. And it's not for me to judge them for not knowing it. It's for me to basically be a happy little warrior and walk in being like, no, that's wrong. Let me help you.
Weird people absolutely believe that. That's a great acronym. I'm gonna have to use it again. But
oh yeah, weird is Heinrich et al. 2010 is one of my favorite. I go back to that paper and read it all the time because him and Ostrom, what's her first name? Elena, she won the Nobel Peace Prize for economics. She points out this same issue exists in economics as well. Economics is not a state of existence without humans. So it does not exist without humans. It does not exist in the natural world. It only exists in a perversion done by people who took it for their own benefit. And I think your point, Dad, is a good one, is that, yeah, people in power don't want to give it up. But to my response to that is, so what? We'll kill you if you don't get it. I mean, that's not, I don't feel that way. But I just had a conversation on Wednesday where 3 of my coworkers were like, I'm kind of ready to get violent. Like they said that openly and willingly.
But remember, Greg, we're trying to facilitate change, right? We're trying to adopt a conservation mindset to address the realities of the world that we clearly see is in need of a changed mindset. So all of this has to go with how do we affect change and how do we do so, positive, hopefully quickly, but positive.
Yeah, and that's what these are.
Question.
And that's what all of these things here, decoloniality, environment, all of these options can be used to do that. So, for example, decoloniality, showing the impact of colonialization, showing the contemporary science is linked to that legacy. An example of that being recognizing the racism behind the national park's creation by forcing indigenous inhabitants off the land where they lived for thousands of years. That is not aggressive physically. That's not telling someone to you can't come here anymore. It's just to acknowledge the fuller
picture. If I am in control, why do I take any of these bullets seriously?
Because the only reason you're in control is because we allow you to be in control. You do not have a divine right. We have not given you that. You have it because we allow you to control us. At a certain point, if that power imbalance gets to a certain threshold, it becomes chaos. And I've seen it in now enough examples in human society when people try to do exactly what you're saying. I'm in charge, I can do whatever I want, their heads end up on spikes. And I want to avoid that. I want to get these things in before we have to get to that position, because they're not wrong for feeling that way. They've been ignored for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So to go back to
the pathway is not chaotic. I mean, that's not a very good pathway. I fear it, but I don't think.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wish that the world was made of lollipops and unicorns, but it's not. And as you made earlier today, transitions are hard. And they're chaotic in general. And if we're not willing to at least, see a different
but we boomers are handing you this chaos for you to address. I mean, in a broad sense, right?
Yeah, and I think that's where we're trying.
A different approach is necessary, and I love the fact that you are creating a different approach, but we leave a lot of these endpoints unanswered, and we need to think a little bit more about those endpoints, because there's you know how do you do it? How do you implement? How do you overcome the bureaucratic, institutionalized control process of which I am benefiting greatly? It's
Well, I mean, I don't want to. I'm not the only person who of marginalized identity on this call, so I don't want to pretend like any one person has answers. If anybody else would like to answer that, they are more than welcome to. I have answers for that can be done in other ways. But the thing I always go back to is,
it wasn't a question; it was an encouragement.
Appreciate it. I didn't take it as a threat or anyway. I heard it as. So one of the things that's really hard for me is when I look at some of the early examples of when Europeans came to this country, they made up lies about the people they were talking about, and those have become truths because they wrote the story. I'm trying to get the one about the murder of indigenous people on an island. Okay, so Peter Martyr de Aguirre's volume, Decades of the New World, from 1511, contains some early historical reports of Spanish colonialization in the Americas. Martyr's account includes report of the Spanish conquistador Núñez de Balboa, whose military campaigns helped to initiate genocide on the American mainland by massacring and subjecting Chilean people in what is now Colombia and Panama. Accounts of Balboa's invasion of the Isthmus of Panama provide important insights into the way that gendercide was enacted in the earliest years of colonization. You can't argue with this. This is what happened historically. After Spanish soldiers waged military campaigns against people of the region, they entered the house of an indigenous leader, in theory, to create a solution. There, he finds a leader's relative and dozens of other people who they mistook as men dressed in women's clothing, living in what he perceived as a same-sex relationship. In response, he gathered the leader, his relatives, and others, and then they were eaten alive by dogs and made the indigenous community watch. That is the inhumanity that I'm talking about. And they can't hide from that anymore. And if it requires someone of my skin color and my brashness to say it, I'm done pretending. I'm done pretending that the subjugation of women, I'm done pretending the subjugation of people of color is not an atrocious human act. And I've noticed that when my friends of color, when women friends, when people who have a marginalized identity speak up for themselves, they're ignored and minimalized, especially by men in power. And that's what makes me mad. Because they tell me, no, that didn't happen. No, that you're lying. No, you're making it up. Those are false facts. They're not. And I can see the evidence of them in my life. This isn't at someone. This is more just a general frustration I have, is that there's example after example after example of how this ridiculous idea of domination has ripped apart many cultures. And it's I think, one of the greatest disservices we did as a society to each other. I think it is the problem. Every other problem comes from this problem. And if you want to pick it all back, you can. We literally sent terror into the soil. We put fear into the heart of our society. And now we're like, why do we have all these Nazis running around? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe because you told them to be scared all the time. Maybe because you told them that everybody's out to get them. It's having to deal with the consequences of your actions, and white people are not used to that because they've always been able to force them on somebody else.
So control has been institutionalized, and we have to address the mechanisms for pointing that out and for making an adjustment. So I like the direction. I'm very curious about how we address those like realities that exist for the people who are in control, and how you're going to affect it without the chaos that we fear.
Totally. And I think it means about injecting a sense of opportunity and curiosity. And the opposite of fear is not excitement, it's actually love. And if we put a love into our curiosity, into our work, into what we're trying to accomplish, I think the same way that when you inject fear into a process, it creates these outcomes. When you inject love into a process, it creates different outcomes. And when we talk about authenticity, to these things, like how authentic do we need to be? No, I'm not going to run up to the Nature Conservancy being like, look what you did, you monsters, you creatures of devil, you bad. I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to say, hey, we need to talk about the legacy of your organization and we need to get on the same page here. I'm not going to lie to you and you're not going to lie to me. We're going to have an open conversation. And in doing that, I've already gotten lots of pushback from lots of organizations that have been like, I don't want to talk about that. No, we're talking about good stuff, no bad stuff. It's like, no right of comfort for you, hun. And I think
I will say, Greg, that I'm thinking along the same lines because in essence, you're going to question the premise.
Yeah.
And you've been operating off of a bad premise. So we're going to do it right from the root, the premise, not just all of these things that you claim as activity. So I'm really excited to see.
Thank you, Dad. Appreciate it. So is there anybody else that would like to say something? Go ahead, Leander.
I'm just going to add in to the opposite of fear also is knowledge. You can't be afraid of something that you know very well, right? Like we're afraid of the dark because we don't know what's there, right? We're afraid of that thing that's outside my window because I can't tell if it's a tree branch or a person, right? But once you have the knowledge, you're no longer scared of that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so similarly in this space, we are trying to imbue that knowledge. The problem being that there's the knowledge and facts that we are trying to put out there, and then there's the kind of whitewashed history that you can turn back to and say, oh, but my history book did not say, as you know, like there was a movement for a hot minute for like changing slavery to indentured servants or whatever in our school books. And so like if that had gone through, then like there's a whole generation of people that would thought, oh, slavery didn't even exist. We just had indentured servants in the United States. And so that part of it, which is why fear is so pervasive, especially, I don't know, especially in the United States, but certainly from what I've seen in the last few years, because our ability to like see knowledge, like is just, I can't even, our critical thinking skills in, you know, at least in the United States is so low that it's no question as to why we have so much fear in what I see around us today, because our inability to critically think for ourselves versus letting Facebook or some news media outlet tell us what is true versus being able to critically think for ourselves leads to a lot of problems, but certainly fear.
Exactly.
Number one problem lately, Andrew, that is, in my opinion, I think you've nailed it, and which is why have we lost this ability to process reason, facts, consistency, provability? How do we lose that so quickly?
No, Leander pointed that out. The people who were in charge did it on purpose. It's not, I don't think it's a mystery. I think it's very specific and it's very intentional. They were like, wait a second, you're getting too smart. No, they saw the 60s and they were like, I don't like how smart you're getting. We're going to dumb it down. I mean, if I look at George W. Bush and
are you suggesting intentional stupidity?
Yes. Have you not seen the movie
Planned? Like we plan people. I don't know. That's a high expectation. I don't think anybody's that's good.
I mean, the same way that
take advantage of opportunity. We're not that smart.
I think though similarly, I would say yes to that answer, only because we look at Black Wall Street, right? That was a planned killing of Black people to ensure that we do not have.
Granted, agreed.
Right. So there are clear examples of gross intentional desire technique implemented in order for us to ensure that nothing happens, right? Similarly to how Black farmers lost most of their land, and the USDA has already admitted to being racist and to ensuring that they did not provide loans to Black farmers intentionally to ensure that Black farmers numbers get lower and lower and lower to give to more white farmers. So I guess in essence, while it definitely shatters the perception of what United States is and how good we are, I would say, yes, we are prone very much, if not more so than anyone thinks, prone to intentionally dumbing people down, decentralizing financial possibilities or whatever. I'm not sure if those are the right words, but yeah, I would say that we've
been very successful at that too, unfortunately.
Yes, no, and I think this literal conversation is what I want to happen in every boardroom in America. I want them to go, but wait a second, why are we doing this? And then they will go with their own moral skills and be like, that's not what we want. Because the scariest part to me is when I hear a 17-year-old repeating what their parents said. And then when I critically examine what they said, they're like, actually, I don't believe that. And I'm like, you're right. You don't believe that. You were told to believe that. Please think for yourself. I get all aggravated about it. But like, we are so close to solving problems. We're like inches away from solving them. If we just could admit that we've done things badly and we've done things harmfully and we've done things intentionally. All right, so I could keep going on with stories, but I think we've actually exhausted here. Oh no, Marcel, do you have something you want to say?
I just want to make a comment about the planned stupidity, that when you don't know something, when you feel like you don't know something, you trust the authorities, right? Like, oh, my religious leader, he's smart, he is educated. So if he's saying that, I'll trust him. Or the politician. I know that politician loves America, so I'll trust him because I know he knows what he's saying. Even though it comes the affinity trust, right? Like, I trust them because they belong to the same religion, they belong to the same ethnicity. So would I trust someone who is, I don't know, a Black politician saying something different, or a queer politician saying something different? They're not like me, so I trust, I have this affinity trust that person is speaking, on my behalf, on my interests.
That's Greg's trust issue right there. I think it's like, how we deal with that is really important. Because I think you're right. Although we have access to so much information, and not knowing it is from what reason? Are you just not capable, not interested, not available? I'm not sure what it is.
No, it's not, and that's the lie. The lie says that they're not interested, they're not capable, they're not wanting to. The truth is they're not given the resources and they're not given the time of day. And that's the thing I've come across with all of my friends, basically, is they go, I have to work 10 times harder to get what you get for free. And it's very
the ignored syndrome.
Yeah, it's being ignored on purpose.
Man. Go on.
Well, and that's and I think what Leander and what Marcelo and what Christian, who's probably waiting to say something, what they've all shown me pretty consistently is how much harder it is just to be taken as a human being when you have a slight difference. And it still boggles my mind when people are like, well, they wouldn't, like when someone says that Black people are more violent, I always think, do you know Black people? Or is it just, did you just like read one out of a racist cartoon from the 1920s, like, or from 1997? Which one is it? I mean, I think if you have any part of a marginalized identity, you automatically have at least a part of this. You see how systems are designed. Like, I'm Jewish, right? They wouldn't let my family into this country originally because we weren't white, even though by all contents we were from Europe. We're European. We should be allowed in. We're not, because we're not Christian. And like, that was for me one of the first big examples of this ignored, purposeful thing. Sorry, I didn't have it at work for that. And I'm moving because I'm sitting down now because standing for 6 hours. Oh my God, don't do that. Christian, go ahead. Please say something insightful, as you always do.
Hi, thank you. I just, I'm mind blown by all of this. And well, it's a topic and a subject that we know deeply inside in our bones. Definitely, the system encourage people not to know, keep them in the shadow of knowledge so that they can control. So the comment that Leander was saying, and the one that you said before, that for me, love and knowledge are the tools to help this movement to evolve in a peaceful way, hopefully in a peaceful way. Once we inform people and we empower them, then with love and acknowledging what all the great knowledge that they have inside, then everything's going to start to evolve and change. It's going to be a very interesting movement, and maybe for some could be a little slow, but that's the way to go. We have to love, we have to inform and provide knowledge to empower, and then hold our hands and just keep walking together.
Yeah.
It's the moral stake in the ground. Thank you for that.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I've come to realize in working on these issues. Yes, I do. My bad. Thank you, Leander. Appreciate it. So I think one of the things that I'm frustrated by / encouraged by, I'm frustrated by the lack of urgency from people that don't look like that look like myself. I'm disappointed in the lack of, and not performatively, because a lot of my friends, they're not here, thankfully, but a lot of my friends are very performatively liberal. They'll say the right things, they think the right things, they don't do the right things. And action to me is much more consistent than platitude. I don't want to see an office of inclusion and diversity. I want to see diversity and inclusion. I'm done being told it will be done. I want it to be done. I don't, yes, go ahead, Marcella. Oh, you're applauding. Oh, sorry. Well, it's just like, I have now talked to so many people in so many places that say the same thing, that they've now reached a ceiling. And I'm like, you shouldn't. There shouldn't be a freaking ceiling. The ceiling is the problem. There's someone standing on that ceiling being like, please don't get higher than the ceiling. You're going to take away my nice house. And then I have friends who are conservative. Like, for all these opinions I have friends who have deep held conservative values that they truly believe. It's not that they've come to them by brainwashing. They believe these things truly. But when we get to the heart of the matter, they lose why they care, because it's no longer about this fictitious, it's us versus them. I have to win. My maximization needs the most important thing. It's not natural. And this is why I say there's a myth of domination. The people who are dominating are scared because they'll be outbid.
Polarization is the opposite of love there, Greg.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anyone who's saying out loud, so my favorite example is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. A lot of people like her for her strong opinions. I don't like her because she's not very realistic. I don't know what world she's living in where these things can be accomplished effectively or quickly. I like them. They're good ideas, but I don't see them as doable. I see them as really nice talking points. I see them making a lot of money for her and to run her campaigns, but not to achieve her goals, much like Bernie Sanders, a wonderful person who has great ideas, but no follow through. There is never the next part. They're not saying, I'm now going to stop talking and bring up an indigenous person who can tell you their experience. I'm going to give space to this person so that Bernie Sanders ran for president twice and lost both times. And both times he lost, he didn't help anyone else. He just
do not underestimate the power of the existing bureaucracies and the upstream battle that must be fought if you're going to affect change that has been institutionalized with people who are being able to get lots of benefit from it. So it is the enemy that you shall face.
Well, I think that's why I need a sword. That's what I'm thinking. That's something I'm taking away from this conversation, is I just need a sword, and I'm gonna go smash some stuff. There we go, violence. I'm perpetuating white supremacy even within that. Gosh darn it, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to do that, guys. I apologize. Also, my friend Isabel has been here this entire time, and I want to thank her so much for being here. Sorry, this is a little offhand thing. And I want to thank you all for being here. This has been 3 months of deep research and a lot of personal challenge, and I'm so grateful for your insights and your willingness and your vulnerability. I want to thank you for that vulnerability, for taking in what I was really nervous about. I was worried that people were going to be like, oh, I don't want to hear this. I can't hear this right now. This isn't what I want to talk about.
Well done, well delivered. Awesome.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. So I was going to have us talk about questions and things. If you have any, I'd be happy to answer them. my brain doesn't work anymore, so feel free to ask questions if you'd like.
Thank you for letting me participate in this, Greg. It was really interesting.
Of course.
And yeah, and I feel very happy. I was wondering if you're still taking an inventory.
I am.
Okay, so I feel happy, and I'm going to go now so that you
Okay.
can. Okay, so but you know, I love you, and I'll talk to you later.
I love you too, Mama. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, bye.
Bye. Yeah, so I would love for anyone who would like to just, if they'd like to say anything, if they have any like things I can improve on, things that, whatever, I'll stop talking.
I'll just say a few things that unfortunately I have to get going, but as you know, it's clearly been a gift having you here at Lacy Consulting Services. So, you know, I'm all about making people cry, so I'll do it if I have to. And it was definitely an amazing experience. And just to be able to have you here with us and have your input, have your energy, have your passion, you know, you never know what you're going to get out of people, right? And I'm glad that our paths crossed the way that it did and the way that it ended up. Ultimately, I think that what you've provided for us is an opportunity to take what you have and explore even deeper and connect it to where it relates to, you know, our values. And the great thing is everything you've done so far aligns with all of our values, which I think you already knew that before as you were creating.
I was trying.
Yeah. And so I just, you know, want to say, I think it's fantastic. I think it's amazing. I think it's fantastic. You're an amazing person. And I think that, you know, when I think about, this is not, what's the word I'm looking for? When I think about this process, it also gets back to what you were saying before. I could see that if a person of color or a woman were saying any of the things that you just said, they would not be received the same way.
Nope. With
the level of passion that you've provided today, they would not be seen the same way. They would have been cut off a long time before now. So it's interesting to think about how we are going to be able to adapt it as people of color doing these workshops, and as, you know, whatever the case may be, right? Whether you're queer or woman or whatever the case may be, as you're presenting this workshop, how are these other people who tend to be these kind of white-led conservation organizations going to receive it? They're going to receive it, like we're going to give it to them no matter what. But, you know, the question is, how tactfully do we do it? Do we do it differently than the way that you just did it? Do we do it the exact same way and say, you know what, F it, they're going to have to deal with it, which is a beautiful way to live life. So there's just a lot of different ways. Yeah, right. There's just a lot of different ways to view and think about this, but I really appreciate what you've done so far.
Oh, that's so kind, Leander. And to everybody who doesn't know, the reason I'm with Lacy Consulting Services, so originally I was supposed to go to Bulgaria. Bulgaria hates gay people, like a lot. And I didn't want to, and I went to Leander and I was like, hey, Leander, can I do this? And he, before the sentence was even finished, like, no, you can't. No, come work with me. I didn't say that, but I asked about a week later. And I presented this idea, and I was really excited to put aside some time and put my like fiery anger about the injustice I see to my friends and family. I'm just so frustrated by it. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to like let it out in a healthy way. Like, this is healthy. I use science to further something. Like, that makes me feel good. So I appreciate it so much. And Marcelo and Christian have been anything if not like so foundational and like understanding how I could have a conversation with people around difficult topics if they were ready to have those conversations. I was a little worried we weren't ready. And I still think some aren't. I think we're going to have, I think, as you're saying, Leander, it's going to be hard to protect our winters, that same thing. It's going to be hard, but they need to hear it. And I don't mind coming in. I don't mind like yelling at them. I wouldn't mind that at all. I'll yell. I'm good at that. I'm loud. I'll go to their offices. Athletics. Okay, never mind. All right, so I'll stop. I'll shut up now. I appreciate you, Leander. Thank you so much for coming. Is there anybody else that? Yes, go ahead, both of you. Anyone?
Oh, sorry, Michelle, you want to go?
No, you go ahead. You go ahead. I've spoken plenty, so you go ahead.
Thank you. I was just in the background listening. I had a lot of things going on in the background in my house before I could show my face here. Anyway, for me, Greg, it's been phenomenal to know you. the meetings that we've had, the getting together and going to the Pride Parade, and this topic for me is so important, especially for the male part of the society. We have to talk about this, and we have to just put it on the table, even if people get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We have to put some topics on the table, discuss, put it out there, and then just have others deal with it and start the seed of knowledge and, acknowledgement and all of that. So as Leander said, it's been fantastic having you in the team. And we don't know what the future will come, but for sure our paths, they entangle, and that's going to be for life. So
Exactly. It's not the last you're seeing of me. Plus, I'm coming to your house for dinner anyway, so it'll be.
Yeah, I know. We're
Yeah,
planning that. I don't know what day, but we'll have you here.
We'll figure it out. Our people will call your people. My girl will call your girl. We're good. We're good.
So thank you so much for being you.
Thank you. Well, I could gush about you, Christiane. So I don't want to flatter you. You don't need the flattery. Christiane is one of the most incredible. This is about
you, Greg.
Well, it is about me, but it's going to be about me through you. What you taught me through this process is it's not about the end goal. It does not matter if they understand every little bit of it. If they understand one element, if they leave a conversation hearing one thing differently, I've done my job. I don't need to have them understand the entirety of queer ecology for them to understand or respect queer people. I don't need them to speak full Spanish to know that Spanish is an important thing to understand. And to take that even a step further, Christiane, her life has been anything of stable. You've gone from one thing to another thing to another thing. You had children, you lived in Mexico, you lived here, you had a whole crazy life, and you're still making impact. It's what my dad does. It's what my mother does. It's what my sister does. It's this incredible element of humanity to persist when everything tells you not to. And it's like, slow down, don't do this, do something else. I mean, my dad was there at the 2008 crisis. He was there being like, you guys didn't acknowledge risk. Why didn't you do that? Speaking truth to power is hard, but necessary. And I don't mind throwing myself in front of that bullet. I will take the bullet if we need to have unambiguous shared meaning. And if we're going to have those things that build a relationship. And Christiane, you started with relationship. It was not about achieving something. It wasn't about getting to an end goal. It was always about, you're an interesting person. We're going to talk about some interesting stuff. And I got to meet your wonderful sister. And I got to be like people who like I would never get to meet. And I got to have delicious chocolate and I want more. And I could gush for hours. Michelle, go ahead. Whatever you're going to say.
Yeah. I just wanted to say thank you. What a rich conversation, presentation. I am very overwhelmed with everything that you presented. Also, totally get it at the same time. It's I get what you're saying. I get where you're going. I do something that really that I have known but only recently deeply experienced is white fragility and I say that I had an opportunity to work with some young people, all from marginalized communities, and I was the rare, like I even said, like outside of being male and maybe socioeconomic status, like I hold all the power positions, so I'm putting it out there, but listening to the conversation there just blew my mind, and today reminded me of that, in that as soon as I don't know what the number is, but it feels like as soon as you insert enough whiteness into the conversation, fragility shows up and closes things down.
And that's exactly, Michelle, that what you're talking about is this very weird space between oppression and naming it as whiteness. It's my frustration. Whiteness does not exist. I know my ethnic identity. I'm Irish, I'm Jewish, I know exactly where my family's from. I can point to you on the map. I'm not white, I've never been white, and I reject whiteness. In doing that, I don't have to now be fragile to this supposed mythical idea of, of being better. It's something that I was in 3rd grade when Marcella something, can't remember her last name, told me I was racist for the first time. And I had to tell her, I was like, I don't understand what that word means. And she had to explain to me what racism was. And in doing that, I was perpetuating racism. And I had no idea I was doing that. So in that beginning of a conversation, like, this is not something we talk about. This is not something we're having a conversation about at the dinner table. It is shunted to the side. It is, we don't discuss it. Make America great again. We cannot think about that, because if we do that, it's going to ruin everything. It's not. It's going to be fine. Take a deep breath. And maybe for Greg, maybe take a Xanax every once in a while.
So Greg, let me just talk to you about your presentation style.
Thank you.
Because I thought you kicked ass. I thought it was absolutely awesome. You are a brilliant storyteller. The investment you've made in your fine arts, performance theater, even though performance is not a good word for you, is really outstanding. I think that do not underestimate the value of being able to tell the story and to get people engaged in the story. So take that nervousness and make it confidence, because it's already there, right? Your emotional journey from being marginalized is already true. You don't need to wear it on your sleeve.
Okay.
So, it's like, because we need to tell the message, right? So I have to say, do not ignore the capability you have of telling the story and keeping people engaged and having fun with it, man. You're really, really well done.
Thank you so much. Well, and the thing is that I don't know how to say this without getting like super sappy, but my parents have been with me in every step of the way my entire life. They have supported me in every way I've needed support. And the only reason I am here is because my parents care, because my parents support me in and I've taken that forward to everyone I come into contact with. Is like, my parents taught me how to behave, I'm gonna do to everybody else. And when my friends tell me about some of the issues they have with their parents, it reminds me how grateful I am. It reminds me how lucky I am. And then I get to go, hey, my parents are great. And they even admit when they do things wrong. They're like, what? Your parents admit that you? I'm like, yeah, I know. It's bonkers. I don't get it either. I don't know how I got so lucky. And it's this, for lack of a better word, it's kind of like permission. I'm allowed to tempt reality and be like, this is not what I'm seeing. My parents taught me to tell the truth when I was, I mean, the great joke, and most people are gone, so I can tell this. I lied so much as a kid. I lied all of the time. I lied about everything all of the time. I would lie about where I was, what I was doing, who I was there with, what I was eating, everything. And my parents told me time and time again, they're like, Greg, if you keep lying, people are not going to believe you. I didn't believe that. I was like, I can get whatever I want. I'm too clever for words. They were right. And when I came to them and said, yeah, you guys are right, they were like, we're not going to say I told you so, but they told me so. And like, and they handled my maturation with more grace than even I could. I even handled my own maturation. And it's the thing that gives me hope for these conversations. My parents, where they started from where they are now, are through their own work. I didn't do anything. They did it themselves. They evolved their own thinking through experience, through exposure, through shared ideas. And it's the reason I think that I can continue on in any of these things. And theater was great, and I loved theater, but at least here my ideas are being heard by people, and they're like, oh my God, what an interesting perspective to take. Oh my God, what an interesting way to further this. And that was what I always wanted from theater.
Passion, performance, love, and knowledge. What can you do, man? Hey.
Passion, performance, love, and knowledge is my new email signature. Good thing I have this recorded. Oh my God, I have this recorded. That's great. I'm gonna have this forever. We're like, Dad, you still love me. All right. Well,
Yeah, well, I assume this is practice session for your pitch, like, so if it was, did a good job, really.
yeah. So basically, this presentation is everything I've learned and how late. And then I wanted to get all of the conservation professionals that I've met to just take a look at it and be like, what do you think? Is this useful? And I'm very happy with the response being, yes, it is. I'm glad someone's talking about this. And then I have a presentation in November of my work this summer. So this is my final big thing before I present everything. And I get to now talk about how conservation professionals agreed with me about everything I said, which is just, that just makes it even better. It's good to be on the right, so good to be on the right track for once. That's great. And go ahead, Marcel, what are you gonna say?
I'll be really fast. I'm just saying that it was a pleasure to know you and also to be here. I really value my weekend, so I wouldn't be here if it's not relevant. So thanks a lot. It was a great presentation. I wrote my comments on the chat if you want to see. And yes, and the best of luck to you, your future. Only good things for you. And yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And Michelle, we've never actually met, but you're fantastic. And if you ever want to have a call sometime, I'd be happy to chit chat about things. Of course. Thank you so much. I'm going to end the recording now.